Hello and welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Lex.
I think today's episode 30. Probably some kind of thing, like a tin or a ruby or a who knows. But yeah, episode 30. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, we've got the three Arrowverse shows, Flash, Arrow, and Supergirl, as well as Doom Patrol, and we had a double episode of The Passage this week as well.
Double season finale of The Passage. Okay, let's crack on with Flash, which we just saw. I don't know, Flash has had a bit of a strange season. This episode started with Eobard Thawne saying something is coming, someone is coming, and it wasn't him, it wasn't Cicada. So the whole way through this episode where they're basically trying to find the humanity in Cicada, Barry talks to him as the Flash, says, hey, we have a cure, Cicada's not into it, and then he kind of has this chat with Nora and makes him think that maybe he has to appeal to the father in Cicada. So he meets him, takes off his mask. I feel like everybody in Central City knows that Barry Allen is the Flash these days. He basically says, Cicada's like, how do I trust you? How can I trust you that you'll help me and then you'll help my niece, Grace, with this cure? And so Barry takes off the mask and he's like, because I'm a father. So that's kind of the whole point of this episode, is them convincing Cicada to kind of take the cure. Let's talk briefly about Cicada over this season. Everybody, even Eobard Thawne, is like, Cicada's the real deal. Like, this guy is one of your worst enemies you've ever had. It took you forever. He was the most bloodthirsty villain.
Flash never beat him. So he's like, Flash is
mythical
kind of white
status.
whales. I mean, at least for me, the Cicada in practice has never really lived up to, like, the awe that everybody holds him in.
Not even close. I mean, his thing is, he's got beef with metahumans because of what happened to Grace. The Doctor, Ambrose, has got beef with metahumans because they killed her fiancé in some kind of weird way. So it's the whole gimmick has been, right, he kills metas, and all, half the Team Arrow these days are metas, it used to be just Barry, but he kills in very bloodthirsty ways. I'll accept that, but he's never come off. I mean, let's talk about, season 1 Reverse Flash, let's talk about Savitar, let's talk about, what was the other one?
The Thinker,
the other speedster. Zoom, that was it, yeah. They are, just by looking at them, because it's probably more to do with the fact their mask is down, they just feel terrifying. They've done despicable things, they've had grand schemes, but even with this kind of bloodthirstiness of Cicada, I've never really been into it.
I think the biggest difference is that, with previous Flash villains, they have had plans.
Yeah.
And Cicada seems to just kind of be reacting to stuff. You think about, The Thinker or Reverse Flash, they had very specific goals in mind that they wanted to accomplish to achieve a certain outcome, whereas Cicada's just kind of out there killing any meta he comes across because out of revenge, and it doesn't feel like it's a very strategic plan or that it's really anything beyond one man's kind of crusade.
Revenge story.
Yeah. And so I think that kind of separates him from the other ones, because part of the reasons that they were so terrifying was because they were calculated. They could outthink and actively worked against Team Flash, whereas Cicada's he's just out there kind of killing metas, and he doesn't give a shit about Flash or any of them.
Quick question, anonymity, has that helped? The first three, not necessarily, I think we always knew who he was, but this is a masked guy that was kind of unmasked within the first 10 episodes. Did that work against him, do you think?
I think it did, particularly when they went on the one episode where they went and they kind of really tried to humanize him with his relationship with his niece, and kind of dig up sympathy and get us on his side, because it didn't really accomplish its goal. It just felt like they were trying really hard to get us to sympathize with him in some way, and perhaps even set it up so that he could work with Team Flash later on, but he's not a very sympathetic character.
So right off the bat, what we're saying is Cicada's never really, to us, lived up to the moniker that he's been given by other people. People have been to the Flash Museum in the future. People like Eobard Thawne, who are suitably terrifying, and it takes a terrifying person to sometimes recognise another terrifying person. So that's immediately been probably my issue with this season. So, okay, fine. They're talking about they're talking about this is the day we bring Cicada down. We give him the cure. They get him to Star Labs. They administer the cure. It kind of works. So up to that, it's been kind of an okay episode. We've had some weird Cecile and Joe beef who really cares, and then something quite magical happens. Another Cicada turns up, which I certainly wasn't expecting.
I wasn't expecting another Cicada, but as soon as she turned up, I figured that it was Grace.
Yeah.
because that's kind of the whole point of the episode, was to introduce Grace as another cicada, because they said like, oh, just, in the past few weeks she started turning into a meta, even though she wasn't a meta before, and they didn't really give a reason like why the wound in her head started glowing again. So it wasn't like, even the kind of reveal of Grace as the new cicada wasn't much of a shock. It was kind of just expected.
The thing about this cicada was she was terrifying. Like, she was overpowered. Like, she kind of destroyed everybody. She destroyed half of Star Lab. She killed Ambrose, and then at the end she kidnaps Dwyer, who's kind of in his hospital gown. He's just had the cure, and she's like, I've missed you, uncle. So she's come back from the future as this kind of, a cicada that kind of worked better. Like, she just kind of was, the tone was far more kind of terrifying than Dwyer's ever been. He's kind of been like a bumbling kind of guy. The voice, he's got that kind of weird thing where sometimes they'll use voice modulation, like with Zoom and Savitar. This is him just going, hey Flash, like, just making himself, and it never works, like literally never. The only time I would say it possibly worked was Christian Bale, but his Batman, but even then, it's
yeah, I mean, even Christian Bale's Batman has kind of become a little bit of a joke.
Pete Holmes does a particularly good kind of like spoof of him on YouTube, so check that out. Yeah, she didn't speak, I think that probably helped. Didn't unmask until the very end, so that kind of helped. But yeah, so yeah, he's cured. We thought, okay, maybe it's time for Eobard Thawne to come in. No such luck. We've got another cicada. I mean, what are your general thoughts about the state of the Flash world at this moment in time?
Start with Cicada probably only deserved maybe 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah.
As a villain, and the fact that we've had him for pretty much this entire season. Did he come in at the end of last season, or is it just this season?
I think we just saw the kind of dagger was the final shot of last season, because I think a meta was maybe killed or something. So we didn't know who, but...
So for this entire season, we've had this kind of half-assed fight with Cicada that's never really lived up to the hype. The storyline has lasted way longer than it should have, and then now we have yet another Cicada. I think it would have worked better if they'd had, like, Dwyer as Cicada for a couple episodes, and then introduced the kind of new Cicada from the future and kept it a little bit of a secret. Another, like, 3 or 4 episodes, not really revealed that it was Grace, and just had this kind of mystery of like, okay, well, we found our cicada, so who is this one? Her appearance now was like the least shocking thing. Like, it really, really lacked the sort of momentous feeling of like, oh, we're introducing another good villain, because it was just, there was no one else it could be.
The way the wind is blowing, not many people are into the cicada season. On Twitter, people are just like, how is he still? Like, all the memes.
I love all the memes about like the other Arrowverse heroes' reactions to Team Flash's failure to catch Cicada, and
I kind of think this is going to go down like a shit sandwich.
I don't think there's any way at this point that they can salvage the Cicada storyline. Like, they've just really had misstep after misstep. What is this, like episode 15?
Something like that, yeah.
So, I mean, we're really nearing the end of the season, and they haven't given us really anything substantial.
Would it be too strong to say that he literally could have been a villain of the week?
No, I mean, like, I totally would have been down for that.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, he doesn't kind of have the grand scheme. He doesn't necessarily have the powers. I mean, his powers have been thwarted like 3 times. They had the whole plan with them going back in time to salvage all the bits to make a kind of device. We know now that Killer Frost is immune to him. She can like freeze his dagger somewhere else. He's been thwarted, quote unquote, several times now. I just don't know why.
Well, I think most of the encounters with Cicada, he's only gotten away because they didn't try very hard to get him.
He kind of fits the kind of category of villain of the week. There's nothing great about him. If this was a, Zoom kept getting away, you kind of understand, because there are bigger plans. Savitar as well. There are bigger ideas here. But yeah, I just really waiting for him to be done. He took the cure, and I kind of thought, are they going to fuck this up? Are they going to stick the landing? They didn't stick the landing. We have another Cicada now.
This could have worked if they'd had the Dwyer Cicada as a villain of the week and used that to kind of, sort of have the hype of like, oh, this is the one villain that the Flash has never beaten, and then, Team Flash manages to thwart him. They think the threat is gone, and then the new Cicada comes in, and they have like several episodes of them trying to figure out where the second Cicada comes from, because Sherlock's had like 38 cicadas, and this has never happened. Nora's from the future, and like this has never happened, and gone with the Grace Cicada as the big bad, because she seems a hell of a lot more competent than her uncle. So I just think like they messed up the timing and the introductions and spent way too much time focusing on Dwyer and his kind of revenge scheme.
Sherlock frequently, he's one of the cicadas the worst Flash has ever come up against. He's one of those guys. So I didn't realise it was Grace. I thought it might have been one of his 37 that hadn't been thwarted coming back, because we just had that conversation where she's like, congratulations, it's your 38th. I thought it was one of his coming back to kind of take revenge on him, and one that actually deserved the kind of praise that Sherlock had been giving, like as in an actual devastating cicada. One thing that didn't really work as well, like the whole time Nora was like going through all of Barry's appeals, the appeals he'd made to like metahumans and villains, and the way he talked them down, and she kept saying, Dad, like think about your speech, what's your speech going to be? And she tried to like find them all and dissect them all and create like a super speech from all the speech, and just like, who cares? The fans don't really want people to be talked down, people want them to be beaten the shit out of, so I wasn't really up for that plan at all. Turned out he did talk him down, so I guess different folks, different strokes, but yeah, I just prefer being punched in the face. It was
Joe that gave him the advice about what to say, rather than Nora. And I mean, like, let's be honest, who really cares what Nora's doing at this stage?
Yeah, like, absolutely.
I also didn't like we have so many kind of heartfelt moments between Iris and Nora, and like, oh, we don't know how much time we're gonna have, and we need to accomplish all of these things and have all these milestones together, and it's just like,
she can come back for the weekend anytime she wants.
Yeah, I mean, she goes back and forth to the future all the freaking time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that entirely. I also don't like the fact that every time Cecile is given more than just a standing, smiling role, she has to fall out with someone, and there has to be angst, and then they go away, and then there's an apology. I think it was Dibney the last time.
Yeah, it was.
Because he didn't rate her like skills as whatever, and now it's Joe. It's just...
Cecile could be a really cool character, but they don't write her that way.
No.
I know every time she appears, you kind of like have this like...
I mean, you just know what's going to happen. You just know she's going to do something with her telepathy. Yeah.
See, and like that in itself is cool. Yeah. Like, I mean, she's got a cool power. She knows everybody's secrets. I mean, she could be a regular part of Team Flash, and like kind of like Laurel and Arrow being like the DA, and also this kind of
like... But by night. Should we move on?
Let's go with Supergirl.
Okay, can I just get a few things out of the way first? Dreamer can now use all her powers with no problem at all. It's just a thing that exists in this world now.
Yeah.
Bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, she has mastered, like, because it was just like an episode or two ago, she talked
to Kal-X, he explained what her powers are in the future, and now she could just magically use them all.
Supergirl and Brainy were like, you have to train, and now she's like fully functional. My big issue was like the very first scene, you have Jean, Supergirl, and Dreamer talking to Menagerie, and Dreamer kind of like gets the glowy ball and is like, and Kara reprimands her. Literally the next second, Jean does exactly the same thing, and it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, okay, so the female superhero has to just stand there with a disapproving look and her hands on her hips, and the male superhero can actually be aggressive and stuff. And I mean, for the most part, I think Supergirl handles gender expectations fairly well.
I would say it does, very well.
But like that one moment, it was just like, come on, guys.
I mean, I agree entirely, and it was jarring. It was completely jarring. The thing is, they're trying to pin him as like an unhinged individual at the moment. He doesn't know if he's like pacifist or the fighter, and it's just not that was the wrong moment for him to kind of go a bit crazy and completely undercut what Supergirl's kind of impart onto Dreamer. No, I agree entirely. Can we stick on Dreamer though, because she had some of the funniest lines in this. Yield or die. Can we just take it down to about a 7? Yield or else. I was howling.
And the fact that like she wore her costume everywhere,
just wearing it in, and she was doing like stretches in it and stuff. Her finding the balance of not just like what she does with her fists, but actually with her words was a delight. It was absolutely spot on humour. I don't often consider Supergirl like the funny show. It's light-hearted. It's very feelings and stuff. Wholesome's a good word. I think Superman and Supergirl, wholesome's the word, isn't it? Yeah.
So this just like brings up visions of corn-fed Midwesterners.
Absolutely, So
this good old-fashioned values.
Yes, this humour it was great. I really appreciated it. It was the kind of humour that when Brainy would say like, I'm going to fight you with physics.
I think like up until now, humour was kind of Wynn's role while he was on Supergirl, and then it sort of got transferred to Brainy. And I think Nia is quickly becoming one of my favorite characters, and I think she does add kind of a nice injection of humour and kind of a different sort of goodness from Supergirl's morality.
And I think one of the people kind of during the fight at the end was like, oh, it's nice to have another new superhero in town, because Arrow, there are multiple, they're vigilantes, not superheroes, but there are multiple of those. Flash, we get plenty of different speedsters, but yeah, Supergirl maybe needed something else. We get Jean, he's occasionally flying about, but it's a new element.
Yeah, for the most part, Supergirl is kind of like a one-woman fighting force, and she sort of takes on everything on her own. So it is nice. Like, I like seeing her team up with the other people, with Jean and Brainy, and now Nia. I think, like, it balances her out a bit.
It's great costume, has to be said. Great costume. I'm not surprised she wears it all the time. If that was my costume, I'd
wear it all the time too.
Should we talk about kind of the D team of it all? It was kind of, it's still that kind of, I don't really care about this team of people. Menagerie, Hat, Manchester Black, and a Morai. They tried to kill Ben Lockwood, and Alex was put on his security detail. What did you make of the kind of the issues that they brought along this episode?
It didn't really feel like anything new in the span of this. All right, so we have the Elite, and we've already we discussed last week how the Elite is not as elite as they would like to think they are.
Yeah, when we say the Elite, we've got a little quotation masks.
And so, and just to kind of like underscore that point, in a single episode, they caught 2 of the Elite, which is essentially half of the team.
They caught Menagerie like it was nothing.
Yeah, like
she saw a pretty necklace.
The first 5 minutes of the show, Menagerie was off the table. Then they got the Morai, and so you just have Manchester Black and Hat. The invasion of the Fortress of Solitude, I felt, was way too easy for them.
Oh my goodness! I mean,
like,
how did they know it existed?
That was never explained.
Hat just happens to have gloves that can carry Dwarf Star Alloy.
I think in just about every other Superman thing, it's been pretty well established that the Fortress of Solitude has a defense system, and yet they just wandered in, and the little robot guy,
Alex, nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, he comes and greets everybody, just lets these people wander around, take whatever they want. For me, that just felt way too easy for them.
Absolutely. They are being given a lot of like freedom to express themselves, the Elite, and they're not that amazing. I mean, she's Supergirl, there's literally no reason. They talk about these 5th dimensional abilities they've got where they can kind of be here, there and everywhere and like disappear quite quickly. Yeah, so what was their plan? They tried to kill Ben Lockwood. They failed. They tried to...
Didn't they want to like co-opt the mutants from the or not mutants, because...
We watch a lot of that kind of TV here.
Metas.
Yeah.
No, aliens. We're in aliens now. I will get it right eventually. Didn't they have like some sort of... Because they stole a device.
Gizmo, yeah.
And they weren't really clear on what it did.
See, all it made me think was that he multiplied himself. And I wasn't sure if that was a Hat thing or a him thing. I don't think it was. He put a belt on as well. I don't know. He could do 2 things. He could multiply himself. This is Manchester Black we're talking about. And he could make someone else look like him, because John found him, beat the shit out of him, and then the kind of whatever it was fell away, and it was just a guy tied up and gagged that John had been unleashing his fury on. So I assumed the device did one or the other and the belt did one or the other.
Well, and he's also got Brainy's ring, which gives him kind of unspecified powers. I mean, it enabled him to fly last week.
Yeah, he flew about this week as well.
Yeah, he did. It wasn't really clear what they were trying to accomplish or how they were going to accomplish it. It didn't really feel like Supergirl's team really thwarted anything.
These are very small stakes and very middling, piddly like issues. I've got to be honest. For someone, Supergirl, she's the strongest of all the Arrowverse, is she?
Yeah.
And yet she's kind of coping with some very small issues here. I just don't know why.
The moment where she kind of changed out of her suit, because she went to the mart going to patrol, and everybody was sort of like, it would send a really strong message if Supergirl marched with all of these other aliens, and because she's more than just a symbol. And so she's there, and she's like listening to people, and she talks to some guy at the march, and I couldn't figure out who he was, but it seemed like she knew him.
Yeah, we'd seen him earlier, but I can't remember why.
Yeah, because he popped up a few times in this episode, and they never really kind of replaced him. So it was just sort of this guy. I expected the moment when she kind of like switches from the Supergirl outfit to like this roby thing, that there would be some significance to Kara Zor-El marching with the aliens, but in the end she just had to go back to being Supergirl, and exactly what she thought was going to happen happened anyway. And I think a lot of this episode felt like that, like the pieces weren't actually fitting together the right way.
It's kind of recycled ideas, and that's kind of what tends to happen when you've got a filler episode. And why are we having filler episodes this late in the day? We need to be introduced to Red Daughter Supergirl. Last week I kept saying Bizarro Supergirl.
I think it's Red Sun Supergirl, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was Red Sun because he was the sun, so I thought Red daughter because she's like Red's like a Russian male, and so that's what I thought would be happening by now, but it's not.
You would expect that to be happening by now. I mean, at this stage in the season, I kind of feel like they've forgotten about her, and we're never going to see her again. I really do sort of get the sense from this that they started this season with one plan, got partway through it, decided they needed to rework the plan for whatever reason, and that's what they're doing now, and that's why things aren't really adding up to like the sort of teasers we got at the beginning of the season.
Manchester Black, Ben Lockwood, both jailed, and that was a lovely way to tie that off. I kind of wish they'd just gone in a different direction after then. It was almost the 50-50, half season that, half season something
I think it would have been really great if they'd wrapped up Manchester Black and Ben Lockwood, and if they really wanted to use those guys later on, I mean, Manchester Black more than Ben Lockwood. Further on down the line, they could have had him escape or be released or whatever, but they also haven't really utilized Manchester Black to the best of his capabilities as a character. I mean, he actually could run a team called the Elite and have it be elite, but he picked people.
Ain't that.
He picked all the wrong people.
Can we now move on to what I found to be the most interesting part of the whole episode? A little bit of background. James is investigating Lena now because of this black budget. Talks to Miss Tessmacher, I think her name is. She's like from the films. And so she goes to tell Lena. And Lena is really into making this superhero thing as quickly as she can. And she talks about the fact that like she has days. And then later on in the episode, Hayley goes to him and says, right, take the night off. And this is really interesting because, again, her assistant's kind of like, okay, well, let's go home. And Lena looks really sad. And she's like, tomorrow might be too late. Then James Olsen is in Catco. He's about to leave. Phone rings, turns around and he gets shot in the back, drops down. Again, I've probably watched too many shows, but it's almost like Lena knows, and she has to create this to save his life. Either way, he will be the test subject for this, because they talk about the fact that she's too worried to put into human trials yet because it's not ready, and Hayley's like, you're being paid to do a job. We need to make super soldiers here. Get on it. So he's been shot. It's probably going to be critical. He will be injected in it. He will become a superhuman. But this whole scenario, the words that Lena used, it makes me think like someone's kind of gone back in time and told her. Again, really unlikely, but what did you make of that whole kind of storyline?
I'm really disappointed in Lena. You know, I had such high hopes for her as a character. I really liked the relationship between her and Kara and her and Supergirl, and I really have just kind of been waiting for the moment that they make her evil, and I sort of feel like that's where this storyline is heading to, particularly with the involvement of Hayley, Lex, and the military and the government, and this plan to just kind of, you know, make super soldiers. Every single movie or TV show or book that has ever featured super soldiers has kind of been a warning to not do this thing. So I can't imagine making super soldiers is going to turn out positively. The one good thing is that like Lena distrusts the government and isn't sharing like her method with them, just the results. But even then, it's kind of,
I think we can both agree James will be the test subject.
Yeah, I mean it's the only thing that makes sense. I mean, it's probably because I mean there is that whole question that's come up a few times of like who decides who gets these powers, and what if you give them to the wrong type of person. Whereas like Lena knows James quite well. He's already kind of proven himself to be a hero, so presumably if you give him superpowers, he's not going to like go off the rails and become a super villain. Although that would be kind of interesting.
That would be a nice twist on the character, considering this is already a very nice twist on the character. I think what's going to happen, this is what I hope is going to happen. She's got this thing, she's going to test it on James, it's going to work. Lex is going to come in, take it, and he's going to try and use it evilly. And Lena will be good by kind of trying to bring it back or trying to thwart Lex. That's what I hope will happen, because I prefer her as good.
I like her much better as good, and I think making her evil is too easy because she's a Luthor.
I mean, let's be honest, her versus Kara will be a great season. As her as like a super villain. I mean, I watched the hell out of it, but I just think let's try and buck the trend. Let's try and have a good Luthor maybe to offset. And you never know. I mean, he might come in as kind of a regular. He may be the next season's villain. You never know what the future is for Lex Luthor. He's probably going to be used sparingly, like Superman, but you just never know, really. He could be the next crossover. They could all be trying to thwart him.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Arrow. So the premise of this one was like they find 4 gang members dead in a warehouse. They got bullet wounds but no shells found at the scene, and the bullets have caused a chemical reaction with the blood and it's caused their skin to melt. So this is kind of Team Arrow and SCPD, their first mission together, and we kind of have teething problems. That's what the whole,
as is expected,
really. And to the surprise of no one.
Just got to this episode, and it started off because I mean this episode's called Training Day, and it starts off with them all in their little like SCPD t-shirts and everything, going through various drills and whatnot, and you know, we find out they're not going to be able to use their weapons. they're not going to be able to wear their uniforms.
Costumes, yeah.
They're basically being turned into like SWAT soldiers. For me, like, this episode was just a continuation of what we've had since Oliver became the mayor, which is like Team Arrow not being able to do what it does best. I'm just not into, like, I want kind of old school Team Arrow going out and finding bad guys and doing their thing. And, you know, we've had him be the mayor, we've had him in prison.
People constantly trying to figure out who the Green Arrow is, and is it him?
Limiting the entire team's sort of functionality. So yeah, this episode was just kind of continuation of that, and I really wasn't that into it. And kind of like the one shining moment was like at the end when the kind of vigilante teams get authorized to be their own sort of squad, and they mention that the vigilante law is about going to be repealed. Hints that we might be getting back to like some proper Arrow action.
Yeah, I mean, is it Mad Dog that says we're basically going to be Black Ops for the SCPD? And even the mayor is like, yes, that's essentially what's going to happen. So finally, for the first time, it feels like 3 years, nobody's trying to figure out who Oliver is. He doesn't have a kid. He's not the mayor. He's not hampered in any way. There are no anti-vigilante kind of ideas going around. They are allowed to do their thing. In the same goddamn week that we find the show is going to end 10 episodes into season 8, all I can say is that thank God nothing will be holding them back. Hopefully we can go out at a great end of this season. God knows how, because everything is kind of up in the air. And hopefully we'll get a good season 8. Couple of ideas. Oliver, basically, you know, he's saying that their tactics are bad, the SCPD. Felicity's saying their tech is terrible. And they sort of go off by themselves to do this kind of thing by themselves. And they kidnap the guy. Oliver holds his head over like a thing of acid or something. It just made me think, like, that is level 1 Oliver. That is like season 1. No idea how to do anything. Getting a confession under duress. Dinah's like disgusted. The mayor's like absolutely appalled. Everybody's like, what the fuck were you thinking? And so at that moment, we're like halfway through the episode, the SCPD and Team Arrow, it's like there's blood in the water. Like it couldn't be worse, the kind of relationship. And so they all go out as Team Arrow. They find the guy, they do it by the book, and they get SCPD involved, and then they're like all friends again. And that was kind of unbelievable for me. And it was that kind of coming together that allowed them to be the Black Ops team.
Again, it was one of those things where they didn't really explain it. Like,
no.
Team Arrow decided, screw the SCPD, we're going to do it our way. Our way is better.
Yeah.
They're going to have to catch up with us. And then there was kind of, I think it was Dinah did this little speech of, you know, this has to work. And they made some allusion to there being cooperation or compromise between the SCPD and Team Arrow, but they didn't really say what that was.
Yeah.
And when they actually went to bring down the villain, it was basically like Team Arrow doing what they've always done with SCPD to come in and arrest people.
Just to arrest him. So for me, the whole like fundamental idea of this episode just didn't work. How you can go from there being blood in the water to them basically getting everything that they could possibly hope for, which is being the Black Ops for the SCPD. So that's why I didn't particularly like this episode. It was okay, but it just, it kind of just blah, you know, nothing made sense. And we need things to make sense. You can't just show us fight scenes sometimes. We need a little bit more. We met Connor Hawke.
We did, yeah. We discovered who Connor Hawke's real father is, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so Laurel went to see Turner and was like, who killed Diaz? He's like, I'll tell you, but I want to see my son. And so the other big kind of revelation was that we found out that Emiko killed Diaz. Not exactly a shock.
Yeah, I didn't suspect her, but when he said she did it, it was kind of like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, Dante basically is the Ra's al Ghul to Emiko. Go do my bidding, and she did it pretty savage kind of way, petulant the flame. We find out again, probably not a huge shock, but Dinah's lost her canary cry. She tries to use it, she can't, and is suitably heartbroken about it. And that's why she's kind of saying to Oliver, this needs to work, because in that moment she was like, all I have left is being kind of like the head of the SCPD. Mad Dog gives her this kind of chat, like, you know, you're more than that, you know, you can be the kind of bit between the two worlds, you know, keeping us together.
And kind of like, because she does go out as Black Canary, and she doesn't use her cry, you know, after she discovers she can't use it. And she does kind of kick ass, and Renee is sort of like, you know, you don't actually need the cry to be the Black Canary.
I can't remember if it's Laurel of Earth 1 or Laurel of Earth 2, but didn't they have a thing that created the cry? I'm pretty sure one of them wasn't a meta and just developed this kind of cry. Possibly Laurel 1.
I think it was Laurel 1.
So, you know, that could be completely changed if she wanted it to.
Because I think, Cisco made her a thing.
I seem to remember somebody using it anyway. But yeah, I mean, they could do that, but who knows. One final thing, let's briefly talk about the future.
My least favourite part.
Oh, yeah, I know. William and Mia finding a cassette player to hear Felicity's message. They hear Felicity's message. That's it. It makes me kind of think that we're going to get an Emiko story, like I said last week, with like the Ra's al Ghul kind of element to it. Possibly not. He may die this season. I'm just speculating. But the 2040 flash forward Forwards will continue with Amiko's kind of present day storyline. And the day that Oliver dies and Felicity kind of says, right, I'm out of here, she will appear in 2040. She'll make that kind of jump across. Again, pure speculation. They could find her in this season's Flash Forwards. Just makes me think they are sowing seeds. All they're doing is sowing seeds for a future that I'm temporarily referring to as the Emerald Archer show. I think it's going to happen.
I think it's a mistake.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake as well, but that's what I think they're doing. That's what I think they're gearing up to that.
Personally, I think having somebody else sort of take over Green Arrow's mantle could be interesting, but the way they've set it up so far, it doesn't seem any different than Oliver's beginning arc, and that's kind of why do the same thing over again, except for the fact that it was successful the first time.
Yeah, it seems entirely recycled, doesn't it? And Amiko, unfortunately, probably isn't going to have, presumably it would be all the Flash Forwards. She's not going to have some awesome flashbacks to go with as well. It's just going to be mostly present day, which is a shame. Any kind of summary for the whole of Arrowverse this week?
I'm really getting very disappointed with Arrow.
Villains wise, nobody knows where we stand. Dante, Earbard Dawn and Red Daughter are the ones we want, but we got no momentum on any of those stories this week. Flash, yeah, maybe we're close to the end of the Cicada, which would bring Earbard Dawn, but there's just...
I think on Flash, Earbard Dawn isn't going to come into it until next season.
I think you're probably right.
Like the season finale, there might be kind of a glimpse of him doing something or making an appearance, but we're not really going to get into his storyline until next season.
Yeah, one question. The Flash Forwards are 2040. The Flash Forwards are 2049. Do you think that's...
as we were watching it today, I'd wondered if they were going to kind of take after she's done with present day stuff, they were going to take Nora and team her up with William and Mia and have kind of this...
Be their burden. Let's move across to Doom Patrol. Basically, the idea is that they need to protect a kid who is a book from the cult of the unwritten book. And every year of his life, as he gets older, more of the book is written on his skin. It looks like sort of tattoos on his skin. His parents are the kind of two main people in this cult as well, which is strange. We see kind of this montage from having birthdays, and as they get on, the father looks more and more kind of skeptical about what the mum's saying. They teach him about this cult, and
they keep telling him that his destiny is to save the world and whatever. And then they get to his 18th birthday, and the mom kind of leaves the room to go get a knife.
Yeah.
And the dad is like, "You have to get out of here. You're not going to save the world. You're going to destroy it. You have to run." And mom comes in and just slits his throat.
I mean, we have seen so much throat slitting in the last few weeks. We just had the Red Wedding, which we watched for our Patreon episode.
It's the method of choice, just slit people's throats.
Stanley as well on Dinah. I mean, Jesus, everybody's getting their throat slit. Anyway, Dad's dead. He runs up. The kid runs upstairs, and the mum chases him upstairs. Oh, this amazing cake. She's like, "You get down here and eat this fucking cake, Elliot." And yeah, I thought that was hilarious. Meanwhile, a guy appears at the Doom Manor saying he's looking for Calder. And I mean, what did you make of this guy? Willoughby Kipling, or goes by Kit?
He's like the off-brand Constantine.
I've written. What have I written? Low rent Constantine. Yeah.
I mean, you've got the Cockney accent. You've got
he's an alcoholic.
He's an alcoholic. He's got the coat. He's got these weird combination of things for spells,
which I did not like. Can we talk about that briefly? Constantine, it's the urine of a virgin. It's the knuckle bones of a priest. It's kind of old worldy kind of stuff. But this guy's kind of...
He's sriracha sauce on a rosary.
Janis Joplin's floss. Songs of spells.
Chewing gum. Knowing gum.
2 grams of Michelangelo's ashes. Is closer to a Constantine kind of thing. But everything felt gimmick about him. And yeah, you've put off-brand Constantine. That's exactly right.
I wish they would have just brought Constantine into it.
Can you imagine? Matt Ryan's Constantine turned up?
It would have been amazing. It would have been a great tie-in with the other shows, and I think it would have worked so much better. And I mean, I would have had more confidence in Constantine kind of doing this than this Willoughby Kipling guy.
Absolutely. One thing I did like was smoked a cigarette. It didn't have tobacco in, but he drew a vertical line down, and that became a doorway. I really liked that. Obviously, it's got that kind of DC Universe money. It looked better than kind of any Arrowverse kind of similar things we've seen. But I was not a fan. He kind of was a bit unbearable. He had that kind of know-it-all thing to him, where he'd kind of just be like, "Oh yeah, you guys, yeah, talk it over. Yeah, it's only the end of the world we're talking about." He immediately thought he was the smartest guy in the room. And the thing I don't like about Cyborg at the moment is that he's completely unbearable. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room as well. And so we've got these two unbearable people literally working together, both thinking they know it all. And yeah, it's often just you've got people like Rita and Larry kind of who are the complete opposite side of the spectrum, and they're just being overwhelmed with all these ideas and stuff, and the balance is a bit strange.
I haven't read any of Cyborg's comics. I think pretty much my whole introduction to Cyborg is the Justice League film Cyborg, and I really like how that was done. Like they really sort of went into the sort of emotional conflict he has trying to figure out who he is now, whereas this Cyborg feels kind of like a petulant teenager all the time, and he doesn't really seem to have much of a purpose.
No.
Rita has her first heroic moment in this episode, which I thought was really cool.
We kind of got her value for the first time.
Yeah, she's kind of constantly in the background being like, I don't want to be a hero, I don't want to be involved with this, what can I do, what am I capable of? And she ends up guarding Elliot.
Yeah, she talks him off the ledge because, he's like the youngest person in the house and yet has a very mature thought, and it's that if I kill myself, I will save the world, which is essentially the truth. And he's sat on a windowsill. We find it's only the second floor, so he'd probably break a leg. But her superpower moment is kind of compassion, and she manages to kind of talk him off the ledge, which was nice because she's kind of being treated a bit like shit by everybody, and it's kind of awkward. She's not being told she's useless, but at the moment she's feeling very useless.
She's being excluded a lot as well.
She had the kind of thing with Cyborg last week where they were together and she was like, I'm not really a hero, don't really feel like it. His reaction to that is not inviting her to this big opening meeting in the first scene of the thing, and she walks in like, oh well, I guess my message was lost at Western Union, which is a lovely dated reference that fits her perfectly. And so when she had this brilliant moment of compassion, but when they were downstairs and one of these attackers comes in,
and she does the like stretchy arm thing,
for the first time her kind of ability was useful,
and she actually had control of it. I think this is the very first time that we've seen her be in control. She did turn into go into Donkey's throat, but pretty much every other time we've seen her power manifest, it's been because she's lost kind of emotional control. She's kind of just disintegrated, whereas this was very purposeful, very like she was in control of it. Probably one of the coolest moments of the episode.
So picture this scene. We've got this kid that they get through the portal. We've got low-rank Constantine who thinks he knows everything. We've got Cyborg who also thinks he knows everything. We've got Rita who's being kind of shat on by everyone.
Larry who's having difficulties with his blue energy.
The videos were interesting.
Yeah, the videos were interesting.
Yeah, Cold had made a small machine which the energy could go into and it would turn the energy into words so they could communicate. And the only question that he gets asked that he can get an answer to is, how do you sustain yourself in Larry's body? How do you live in there? And the response is quite a kind of dark, evil kind of sounding voice, and it says torture. And that can be interpreted many ways, but it's, what was your take on that?
I think like in that moment, up until this point, Larry has kind of viewed himself as the victim, and that he's the only one that suffered from their sort of partnership, and he doesn't have any control. And seeing that moment where like the one thing that the entity is able to say is torture sort of hit home that they're both suffering because of this union, and they need to find some way to work together so that it's a better experience for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, of all of the characters, that's probably what I'm most interested in. I'm quite interested in, obviously, Jane's, we're learning about different personas every week, but the kind of the Larry blue energy, it's interesting. And now that they might kind of try and find this device, it kind of exploded, so it might need a bit of work done to it, but having a communication between the two of those would be quite interesting. Quick question, the blue energy, when he's talking to Rita, Larry's like, I'm no hero, but this energy is a hero. There's a moment where the blue energy opens the door and the kid is allowed to kind of go out. He's being protected within the thing. Is that like a malevolence, or was the blue energy just going to turn the TV on, do you think?
Honestly, I don't know. I wasn't sure why that happened in the show, except that it allowed us to get to the moment where Elliot is kind of going to throw himself out the second story window. Yeah,
because, I mean, they are being attacked through the wall, but, I mean, he may not have been red, and obviously the episode ends with him being red, and we get this huge, like, eyeball in the sky of the, what's it called, like, the Unwriter or the Destroyer or something?
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's something to do with the world being unwritten. That's how the apocalypse will turn out this time. But, yeah, interesting. Maybe he's not totally good. Maybe he's kind of chaotic good or something. This energy. What did you make of the kind of fight scene at the end? The only bit I liked about Kipling and Cyborg when they were standing together was Cyborg's like, well, I'm going to use science. He brings out he turns his arm, it's like a kind of bazooka cannon thing. And Kipling's like, well, I'm going to use magic. And he brings out a Beric Dondarrion style flaming sword, which I was very into. And again, the effects were very good, I thought. The people they were fighting, they were dressed like Michael Jackson and they're the face of Freddy Krueger. When they were killed, they exploded into a bunch of letters.
They were made out of dead skin and unsent letters, which I just thought was like the coolest thing ever.
It was perfect, and so they've got this very stylistic look, and when they would die, it would be like the final day in Harry Potter 1 where letters are coming down the chimney and everything, and he's like jumping, there are letters everywhere. It was that kind of feeling. And they reminded me of like, just, they were very generic henchmen, kind of like putties from the first series of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and they were just taking them down like at will with this flaming sword and this like gun, and it was very cool. And then Kip kind of betrayed him, which was a bit strange. He like pushed him into them, and he went because he wanted to kill the book, essentially. And Cyborg's thing is that he's, what's, obviously chaotic good and other good, what's good? Like, just like Superman good. Like, I'm willing to listen to kind of any other thing, just we save people, because that's what Cyborg is. And he's bending over backwards in this episode to not kill the kid. That's all he's worried about. Is he's vehemently against killing the book, and they will do anything it takes, even sending Jane and Mr. and Robot Man off to do this absurd thing that we'll talk about in a second. But Kip's not that way. He was just like, yeah, let's just go and kill the kid. What did he bring out, like a syringe at some point or something, or a knife? I can't remember. But so that's my take on Cyborg at the moment. He's just this morally perfect individual, and it doesn't really fit in with anyone else in the show.
See, I don't really see him as morally perfect. I see him as just very ambitious. Comes from his sort of introduction of being like, oh, in 5 years I can join the Justice League and stuff, and it makes me think of those people who have like their whole life charted out, and it's more about ambition than the actual morality and actually being a hero and saving people. It's that he's kind of after the prestige more than anything.
Fair enough. So that was kind of what was happening in the house. I think there was the Royal Guard of Nirnheim, and some other people, and they basically take the book and read it. Meanwhile, Jane and Robot Man have been sent to sew up a stigmata that's happened in this priest in Spain's hands, and the stigmata is a gateway to Nirnheim. So they have to sew it up with Janis Joplin's dental floss. Yeah. Any general comments on their storyline? I mean, they fail because Jane has a breakdown, she's in a church, and again, for the second episode in a row, we get the idea that whoever is the original in her body, something happened to do with like priests as well, because she screamed at the priest, you failed her. So that story's developing in the background.
I didn't really think too much of the Cliff Jane storyline, because it basically seemed to serve the purpose of reinforcing the sort of paternal relationship between the two of them. I didn't think we needed a lot more emphasis. Like, I mean,
we get it. I mean, Jesus,
they literally showed Jane as Cliff's daughter. We got it last episode, the kind of correlation between them. We didn't need a whole story arc to like reaffirm that.
Mention of Penny Farthing, the latest kind of named persona we've got, who seems utterly useless. Yeah, I mean, she's just apologetic to a T. That's English. We get that. I apologise for everything. He's like, right, you ready to fight? She's like, yes. She walks past him and joins the other team. Just totally useless. No superhero power kind of presented itself. They can't all be winners. The one other interesting thing to note probably is that this is going to be at least a 2-part. You know, it's not a self-contained episode, which is interesting. The eyeball is rolling around in the sky, about to rewrite or unwrite the world. What would you say, is this the 4th episode? Mr. Nobody, Fook, whatever his name was, Fook from Fook's. This is the new people about to unwrite the world. What's the villain? Like, what are they doing here? Are they throwing spaghetti, or are they just, is there going to be not a season villain? There's just going to be constant different villains. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think they're probably trying out different things. I mean, I think, Mr. Nobody is going to come back as sort of the primary villain. Yeah. Maybe just a primary villain overarching through the series, because, I mean, they have him narrating it, so it doesn't seem that likely that he's going to be finished after one season. It seems more like it's going to be this ongoing thing. I mean, at this stage, you sort of have Cyborg there trying to get these people to be a superhero team, and so it's not that unbelievable that they keep kind of stumbling into these various situations where they're sort of expected to be heroes and they kind of fail epically.
I'm not into it, I've got to be honest. So far it's a no, that we're kind of 3 and 4 episodes. I think it's a bit much. I would rather they maybe either did... I need to know what the plan is here at the moment. It just seems a bit like nobody knows. I'm enjoying it, but yeah, I think they need to nail something down so that we can kind of get a bit of momentum going, because it feels a bit stop-start at the moment. For me, that's just my take.
And then finally, we had double episode of the Passage for the season finale. To be perfectly honest, at this point, I've like completely lost interest in the TV show.
Wow, that is a big statement. Let's talk about that, because I assumed today was going to be a lot about, we talk about the TV show, we talk about the books, we talk about how they've diverted.
Kind of the main thing is they've weakened the story and they've weakened a lot of the characters. So books are very complex and very intricate, and I mean some of the best world building that's out there. They're really well thought out, and I mean they started off really strong, and it wasn't until probably like episode 4 or 5 that I started to kind of get a little bored with what was happening. You know, they've destroyed Babcock, they threw in the relationship between Wolgast and Lila, they created unnecessary problems by like killing one of the 12 early on, and it just has continued to feel like the writers don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
Like I understand, you know, when adapting a book into a movie or television show, like some things need to be changed, some things need to be streamlined or reordered so it makes sense in a different medium. But like when you have really strong source material, it doesn't make sense to completely rewrite it, which is kind of what they've done here, and they haven't rewritten it better. I mean, like there have been some shows like True Blood, the show really deviated from the books, and the show was much better. I mean, the books are crap. They are the worst written things I have ever read.
That's good consumer advice.
But then, you know, like you have The Handmaid's Tale and American Gods, where they've made some changes, particularly like with Handmaid's Tale, they've updated it because I mean the book was originally written in the 80s and they've set it kind of more contemporary. But they didn't do these like massive deviations away from the plot. They didn't completely change central characters. The writers on Passage are not good enough to rewrite the story.
I mean, that's interesting. So, should we talk about the changes? I mean, should we talk about the episode? 109, basically, they're out. They have escaped. Sykes is dead. Brad has the cure. Virals are all out. And Brad and Sykes were in Fanning's kind of enclosure to sort of shield themselves from all the virals. And Leah wanted to blow up 4B so that they would all die. And Richard was like, Sykes and Brad are down there. Not happening. And they're having this kind of fight. And Amy, who knows that it will mean death for her, presses the button on the Elizabeth protocol. It explodes. Brad gets out with the cure. Thoughts on that? Or how is that different from the book?
Again, this time period in the books was not very, very detailed. And the kind of escape sort of happened very quickly. Wolgast isn't as involved in, you know, he's not like running around the compound with a gun. In the book, basically, one of the sweeps lets the virals out, and Wolgast kind of takes that opportunity to scoop up Amy, and they just run, and that's it. We don't really see any of the other stuff.
Do you know what I found really funny about this episode was when Richard said to Sykes, they've cured that bird flu. Yeah, the one that this was all about, trying to make a cure for. Yeah, so that's great.
Cure the vampire flu now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like they tried to make a very insignificant part of the story more significant than it needed to be, and that's kind of where they went wrong.
So what's the kind of the status quo here? Brad is now had the cure. Is he now immortal? Lila's had the cure. She is now immortal. I'm assuming do these people have roles in the book?
Yeah. So what happens with Lila is like her storyline is completely divorced from Wolgast's and Amy's. She's a doctor. She started dating this guy, David. Within a few months she got pregnant, so he asked her to marry her, so she agreed. They don't have like the best relationship. Wolgast like randomly calls her in the middle of the night wanting to talk about their daughter Eva. She's not really interested. The virals get out and Lila's pregnant, and she kind of goes a little bit crazy. I guess it's kind of like almost PTSD. Like she lives in a complete fantasy world and she's completely oblivious to what's going on around her, and she ends up teaming up with one of the sweeps from Project Noah who escapes and stumbles across her, and they go off on this kind of road trip, and she ends up being kind of part of the, because you know how like they say every one of them gets one person. Yeah. She kind of becomes that person, so she's part viral, part human, and she keeps stealing like human babies and raising them until they're like 3 or 4, and then she gets rid of them. She doesn't really, I mean, and she's nuts basically through the whole thing. Like she's not rational. She's completely delusional in all aspects. Wolgast and Amy escape. They end up at this cabin. He has to shoot the guy who lives there. where there's like ash from an explosion. It's kind of like the virus is in the air. Like Wolgast gets it and he knows he's dying, and he at some point he just kind of like goes off. He doesn't get the cure or anything, and then later on, either in the second or third book, it's towards the end of the story anyway, he comes to Amy and she like releases it, but he gets turned into a viral basically.
It seems like there's a lot of differentiation there. Should we talk about episode 10? I mean, it sounds like they've taken a little bit of the same story. Brad, Lila and Amy living by the lake. They find out the city's being lost. Richard took Babcock's offer. He's her one. Yeah, and the CDC doesn't exist. Leah has this conversation with all like people in like the UN or something, the other nuclear powers. They're saying, have you got a cure? And they basically bomb the shit out of America.
Yeah.
America's turned to ash. Then we get this kind of flash forward to 97 years in the future. And I know that obviously she is what she is, but I assumed it would be like an older actor playing the role of her in the future. And it was, I don't particularly like it. I don't know. I mean, does she not age? Is that the thing?
She does age, but she ages very slowly. So, like, in the book, she starts off at, like, 6 or 7, like, kind of young-ish age. Whereas in the TV show, they've sort of, like, gone into the middle of the ages where she's more like kind of 10, 12-ish. Yeah. So, 97 years in the future, she's sort of aged to the point of being, like, a 14 or 15-year-old. And then, kind of by the end of the book, she's aged to being sort of a young adult-ish. So she does age, just ages incredibly slowly.
Yeah.
I mean, I did enjoy the final scene. It looks very promising. I'm just wary because they've mangled the story so much so far. It's just kind of like, what are they going to do next?
So, yeah, I mean, that's the season. General thoughts? Not a fan.
Read the books.
Go read a book, everyone.